Everybody say wandering in the wilderness. To wander in the wilderness is to have a relationship with God, but allow doubt to keep you from your destiny. God told Moses that he was going to come down and rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. He was going to take his people from Egypt. Egypt is a type and shadow of sin. Moses is a type and shadow of Jesus. The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. The New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. And so what we see in the Old Testament just paints a picture of what God is going to do through Jesus Christ. And so Egypt represents the bondage of sin, and Moses is the deliverer sent by God to take them out of sin into a place of peace, joy, and prosperity that God desires for all of his children. But here's the problem with the promised land. See, God has grace to pull us out of sin, but then we have a responsibility to respond to his grace with another level of faith that pushes us out of the wildernesses of life into our promised land. Numbers 13, 1-3 says, the Lord now said to Moses, God is speaking to Moses again, not about what it's going to take to get the children out of bondage in Egypt, but what it's going to take to get the children into the promised land. It is showtime now. He's saying, I want you to send out men to explore the land of Canaan, the land I am giving to the Israelites. Send one leader from each of the 12 ancestral tribes. So Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He sent out 12 men, all tribal leaders of Israel, from their camp in the wilderness of Paran. Verse 25, after exploring the land for 40 days, the men returned to Moses, Aaron, and the whole community at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They reported to the whole community what they had seen and showed them the fruit that they had taken from the land. This was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here is the kind of fruit it produces, but the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak, the Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites all live in the hill country. The Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan Valley. But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land, he said. We can certainly conquer it. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. We can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. And all the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought too. I love Hebrews chapter 3, verses 16-19, because it adds context to the text. It says, for who were those who heard and yet rebelled? Was it not all those who left Egypt led by Moses and with whom was provoked for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest? But to those who were disobedient. So we see that they were unable to enter rest because of unbelief. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. I'm not going to ask you to touch your neighbor. I'm going to ask you to answer this question internally. It's not rhetorical. I want you to answer it. Are you looking for rest? In any area of your life, do you feel like there's a place of peace, joy, and prosperity that God is desiring for you to live in? But for some reason, you are finding it difficult to make it into that destination. Are you tired in your marriage? Are you tired in your career? Are you tired in your ministry? Are you tired of your parents? Are you tired of your children? Somebody said. Well, God doesn't want you to be tired. And there's a place of peace and joy. But here's the problem with the promised land. He's not just going to give it to you. See, there's two sides. There's the wilderness, and it's a place of grace, right? Because he took the children of Israel out of bondage. So the wilderness is better than where they were. God will use his grace at times to drag us into better places. It doesn't take any of your faith. It's something that he really just gives you. Let me correct that. It does take a level of faith, but not as much as it takes to maintain and get hold of the whole blessing. They got out of the place of bondage of sin, and now it's time for them to get to a higher place of success and promise. And God sent Moses to do most of the work to get them out of the promised land. And now he's saying for you to get them out of Egypt, but now it's time to get into the promised land. And he's saying, this one's on you. I got you out of bondage. You didn't have to do much for that. That's salvation. Now it's the wilderness. It's sanctification. Now you're going to have to make some choices to use your salvation to get peace in your marriage. Now you're going to have to make the decision to use the salvation to get peace in your family. Now you're going to have to make a decision to use salvation to get peace on your job. I've given you salvation by grace through faith, but now it's sanctification time. Now it's time to use the salvation to go to another place. The wilderness is just existing. The promised land is excelling. And here's an interesting interrogative for you. Are you existing in the wilderness? Or are you excelling in your promised land? Here it is. I'm going to explain why we wander in the wilderness. We wander in the wilderness because we allow doubt to exaggerate the size of our problems. Numbers 13:32 through 33, the land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. All the people they saw were not huge. Everybody in the land wasn't a giant. But here's the problem with doubt. Doubt exaggerates the size of your problem. You may have issues in your finances, but you're not going to be broke forever, but that's what you say. Your children may not be acting right today, but what you say is they never gonna learn. Stop walking around saying that nobody wants to be your friend. That person that you wanted to be your friend may not want to be your friend, but that doesn't mean nobody wants to be. Stop telling your spouse they never do anything nice. Stop telling your child they never do what they're told. The issue is you have exaggerated the size of your problem. Stop saying your boss never appreciates you. Here's a question. Did he give you your check? That's doubt talking. And there are times where God will take us to a place and the problem will be bigger than we are. But the question is, do we think the problem is bigger than him? I want to get this straight, because sometimes we say, God, I just want more faith. I want bigger faith. But Jesus said, if you have the size of a mustard seed. So what that makes me think is that the problem is not faith. If he says you can take a mustard seed, which is a very, very tiny seed that grows into a gigantic tree, if he's saying you don't need big faith, all you need is a mustard seed faith, what that tells me is that the problem is not the size of our faith. The problem is the placement of your faith. Doubt is not really doubt. Doubt is faith in the wrong thing. Oh, that's good. I'm going to try this side. This is the holy side. This side John's on. Doubt is not doubt. We say doubt, and I understand what we mean when we say doubt, but doubt is not really doubt. Doubt is faith in the wrong thing. When you look at the problem in your marriage and you say, I doubt this will ever work, that's not really doubt. That's just faith that the problem is bigger than your God. When you look in your account and you say, I'm always going to have more month than money, that's not really doubt. That's just faith in your finances as opposed to faith in your God. Doubt is not doubt. Doubt is faith that's misplaced. That's good right there. Preach, Mackie. Here's the question. Where are you placing your faith? Because everybody's been given a what? A measure of faith. So where are you placing it? Are you placing it in your problem? Are you placing it in your boss? Are you placing it in your crazy coworkers? Are you placing it in your children? Are you placing it in the lack of your education? Are you placing it in your lack of prominence? Are you placing it in your lack of finances? Where is your faith? Because I'm here to tell you, a faith placed in God makes every problem look small. A faith placed in God makes every giant look short. A faith placed in God makes every problem look easy. They exaggerated the size of their problem because their faith was in what they saw. And is there anybody that knows we don't walk by sight? We walk by faith. We don't look at what we see. We look at what God has said. And so when they saw those giants, they should have remembered what God had said. God said, I am taking you into the promised land. And God sits outside of time. Why do you need to know that? That helps you understand that God is not surprised because he's not walking with you. He's not surprised when he sees a problem because he sits outside of all the problems. So he knew who was in the promised land before he sent them there. God knew the issues you were going to face in your marriage before he said that's the one for you. God knew the problems you were going to have with your teenagers before he said have a child. God knew the problems you were going to have on your job before he said sign the contract. God knew the problems we were going to have in ministry before he said plant Chosen and Quest. God is not surprised about your problems, so why are you? And the fact that they said we look like grasshoppers is just psychological projection. Psychological projection is when you take your personal thoughts and put them on another person. So you thought you were a grasshopper, and because you thought you were a grasshopper, you're assuming that's what everybody else thinks. See, the issue is that doubt causes you not only to exaggerate the power of other people, but it also causes you to underestimate your own power, because anything that you're saying about yourself, you're saying about your God. Because why would God make you like a grasshopper? Why would God make you weak? Why would God make you undesirable? God, you're his child, and God loves you. And not only that, you're a representation of him. He said to Jesus and the Holy Spirit in the beginning of Genesis, let's make man in our own image. So when you say that you're a grasshopper, what you're really saying is God's one. They are saying that they think their God is small. So by default, they're thinking that they are small. Doubt exaggerates the size of your problems. And it also underestimates your ability. We allow doubt not only to exaggerate the size of our problems, we also allow doubt to discount the power of our God. Numbers 13:31 says, we can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. And that's facts. That's not the issue. The giants were more powerful than they were. But the giants were not more powerful than God. So what doubt does is doubt discounts God's power. There's a scripture that I love. It says that God is not a man that he should lie, nor is he the son of man that he should change his mind. Why do we need to know that? Because that is confirmation that God won't promise anything that he does not have the power to provide. If God said that he will bless your ministry, then guess what? God has the power to provide blessings to your ministry. If God says that he's going to fix your marriage, then God has the power to provide the answer to that problem. If God said he's going to take care of that bully at school, then guess what? Why are you afraid? Because if God says that he has a promise for you, then he has the power to provide that promise. God says, I'm going to take you to the land of milk and honey. And guess what? God knew who was in the land before he said, I'm going to give it to you. The giants should have actually increased their faith instead of decreasing it. Because God had already told them when he was taking them out of Egypt who they were going to meet. But when we focus on the problem, it discounts God's power. Whatever you focus on gets bigger. That's why God says, fix your eyes upon. Because when you fix your eyes, in other words, if you focus on him, he has all of your attention. And when he has all of your attention, it lowers stress. Why? Because I can't worry about my children if I'm worried about God. I can't worry about my finances if I'm worried about God. I can't worry about my ministry if I'm worried about God. I can't make something else big if God is taking up all my space. You know who handled this perfectly? We usually only preach this around Christmas, but I think it's an excellent example of what I'm saying. Luke 1:34, Mary asked the angel Gabriel. Gabriel is the archangel of the word. Anytime you see a word that's important being brought in the Bible, is usually Gabriel. We believe that there are three archangels. Archangel Gabriel's the archangel of the word. Archangel Michael is the archangel of war, and Lucifer used to be the archangel of worship. Anytime you see war in the Bible, is usually Michael handling that. And then we know what happened to Satan, who was the archangel of worship. He got caught up in pride and he got cast down to the earth, and that's where Adam and Eve met Satan. And so Gabriel is bringing a word to Mary that she has to decide on whether or not she's going to believe it. So Gabriel shows up and says to Mary, you are going to have the Son of God. Mary says, how can this happen? Everybody say how. See, don't gloss over that how. That's key. Because mentally, she knew it was not possible. Physically, she knew it was not possible. She says, how can it happen? I am a virgin. I've taken the sex ed classes in Jerusalem, and I know how this goes down. I told Joseph from the jump that if he wants to get with me, he's going to have to put a ring on it. So that has not happened yet. And so I know physically it can't happen. But the reason Mary is such a powerful young woman is because the fact that she actually left room for her faith. The problem with doubt is that doubt leaves no room for the miraculous. See, our problem oftentimes is that we limit God by our own limitations. We tell God what he can do based on what we think we can do. So Mary says, I know that I can't have the Son of God. So I'm not telling you it can't happen. I just want to know how. God, just give me the strategy here. If you tell me how, I'm walking with you. See, Mary is such a powerful woman, and we can be powerful as well when we stop putting our physical and human limitations on a spiritual and holy God. See, you can't always understand the holy as a human. You can't always understand the infinite being a finite being. So God reminds us that his ways aren't our ways, that his thoughts are not our thoughts. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so are his ways above our ways and his thoughts above our thoughts. Mary understood that just because I can't do it doesn't mean my God can't do it. Is there anybody that understands that just because you can't make it work doesn't mean your God can't make it work? Just because you can't fix the doesn't mean your God can't fix the marriage. Just because you can't figure out how to fix that teen doesn't mean that your God can't figure out how to fix that teen. You serve a God that can do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that you could ask or think. She knew better than to take her physical and mental limitations and put them on God. This is why some of us are wandering in the wilderness. Because you think it's on you. And pride comes before the fall. Why would God give you an assignment that exempts him? That's good, Enemico. You think it's about you. So when you can't do it, you lose faith. Let me help you. The assignment is about him. He's not going to ask you to do anything that exempts him. Why? Because when it gets done, he says, I get all the glory. When it gets done, he's saying, you're going to deliver people from sin and show them who I am. And if you could do it on your own, how could they believe in me? Here it is. Doubt causes you to discount the power of God. And doubt can also cause you to disregard the promises of God. We need to expect our promised land to be occupied. Think about this for a moment. If it's all about God, then we need to expect God to be necessary. And I kind of feel them on a level of frustration, but because if we just being honest and we read it for what it says, it really could be confusing because God, why would you take me to a place that you said is mine and it's occupied? God, didn't you say that the earth is yours and the fullness thereof? If you own the whole earth, then why are you taking me to a place that's occupied? God, you play too much. Why are you going to tell me that this house is mine and there's a whole family in there? But here's why I believe God does that. It's because God is not just trying to give us something, he's trying to grow us. And the problem is we want God's presence and not his presence. What do I mean? We want God's presence, Presence, and not his presence, Presence. God, just bless me. God, just give me freedom. God, just take me out of failure. God, just bless my career. God, just bless my money. God, just bless my ministry. God, just bless my marriage. God, I'm not concerned with your presence, Presence. Don't talk to me about prayer. Don't mention fasting. Don't talk about a daily devotion. Don't talk about serving at Quest. Don't talk about showing up on a weekly basis. Hey, you better not talk about giving. God, I'm not concerned about your presence, Presence. I just want the presence, Presents. God, just bless me. But God says, I'm not going to give you the presence without the presence. I'm not going to give you the blessing if you're not willing to believe. I'm trying to grow you. God is like Santa. He's got a big bag of blessings. But he wants relationship. And you as a parent understand that, because who wants a child that all they want is the iPhone? All they want is the Xbox. Why don't you ever talk to me? Why don't you let me know how your day is going? Why don't you let me know how I can help you? No, most of the time we get aggravated with our children who just want presence and not the presence. So why do we expect God to be any different? Listen to James. He says in chapter 1, 3-4, you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to what? Grow. So let it grow. Stop fighting. Believe. Stop quitting. Stop turning around. Stop walking around in circles in the wilderness. Because faith in God will make you ignore the evidence. And the giants that are standing in our places of promise are only tests to see if we're going to grow into God's presence or give up because we just want the presence. God is not just trying to make us happy. He is trying to make us holy. And some of us are looking at our promises from the wrong perspective. Just because you need a little faith to make it through school doesn't mean you picked the wrong school. God is just trying to grow you. Just because you have to work a little harder on the business to make it profitable doesn't mean you picked the wrong business. God is just trying to grow you. Just because you need a little bit more faith to make the marriage work doesn't mean it's time to go see the divorce lawyer. It just means that maybe God is trying to grow you. Just because the promise has a problem doesn't mean we need to turn around and settle for the wilderness. We talked about this a few months ago when we talked about David. David was told that he would be king. That was the promise. But to be king, he had to defeat Goliath. That was the problem. God said that he would bless you with beautiful babies. That's the promise. But those same beautiful babies will become teenagers. That's the problem. God said he would bless you with a career. That's the promise. But that career requires 6 years of post-secondary education. That's the Every promise comes with a problem. And the only way you get the promise is if you can believe God through the problem. We will never get into the promised land until we get rid of unbelief. There are times where God will bless you despite your behavior. But then there are other times where God says, if you want this promise, it's on you. And to get this promise, you've got to get rid of the unbelief. To get to the next level, you've got to level up in your faith. If you really want the marriage that you can have, then you're going to have to believe that you can have it. If you really want the promised land that I've called you to be in your family, you're going to have to believe that I've got the power to give it to you. If you really want the financial peace that I've got for you, it's going to take more than the Dave Ramsey class. You're actually going to have to believe that I have the power to give it to you. There are times where God will literally submit his power to your perspective. God will submit his power to your perspective. God says that I will allow you to set the parameters for what happens in your promised land. Are you willing to get rid of the unbelief so that you can take possession of God's promises?